The trade war roller coaster continues with two stunning twists over the past 2 days. On Tuesday, President Donald Trump postponed his planned tariffs on another $300 billion worth of Chinese goods until mid-December. He said so it wouldn't ruin Christmas for American consumers. Well, indirectly, though, he was also admitting for the first time that it's ordinary Americans paying for the tariffs, not China. Then on Wednesday, a Trump tweet suddenly linked the trade war to the Hong Kong crisis, suggesting that should be resolved first, though China has declared Hong Kong as a purely internal matter. So do these fresh twists reveal the White House has no clear plan for its trade war? And how should China proceed with such an unpredictable, inconsistent adversary? Well, joining us here from Shanghai is Dr. Wallace Cheng, a research fellow at the German Development Institute. And also from Washington, James Early, CEO of Stansberry, China. Welcome to you all. Now, on Tuesday, President Donald Trump seemed to admit indirectly for the very first time what many financial analysts have long said, that tariffs on Chinese exports mostly hurt American consumers and will continue to do so. Though Trump painted as a gift of some sort to the American public, saying, well, we are doing this for the Christmas season. On Wednesday, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross also reiterated that it's all about not disrupting Christmas, which, by the way, is still 4 months away. But if China is truly paying for the tariffs, Dr. Cheng, as Trump often says, why link the tariffs to Christmas shopping and the potential to spoil the Christmas season?
Christmas is a few months away, but this topic is very interesting. I think this is trying to mitigate the pain to U.S. economy, particularly consumers who feel directly the pain of the tariffs. But it will not eliminate the uncertainties to problem with the economy, which has already seen the sign of recession. Particularly, you see the industry production has been 2 quarters consecutively very low growth rate, and also the investors already cut their capital expenditures. So without concrete deals between U.S. and China, I think this tariff will continue to be biggest clouds hanging around the U.S. economy.
Right, no concrete deals as yet, but let me get your take on this, Mr. Early. How significant do you think this is, that Trump is essentially saying there is a connection between the tariffs and the added burden on consumers? Do you expect Trump's critics and his Democratic rivals running for president to jump on this?
Well, you know, I'm going to say I think people have a fairly low expectation of Trump speaking with precision, and I don't mean that as big of an insult as it probably sounds. Everybody knows a trade war typically hurts both sides, and it's clear China has been suffering in some of the numbers. It's also clear the U.S. At least will start to suffer, or is starting to suffer now. The U.S. has had a relatively strong economy, a really great stock market, and Trump has been resting on those as sort of the pillars to demonstrate the success of his trade war strategy. And suddenly, it's looking like that stock market, looking like that economy is not so strong. So Trump is sort of looking back and thinking, well, look, China, when they imposed tariffs on the U.S., they were very careful to tariff the goods that were most easily substitutable from other countries. The U.S. did not do that. The U.S. had kind of a blanket shotgun strategy, and Trump is probably looking back wishing he did that. He does not want to be the Grinch who stole Christmas. He does not want to be the one who killed retail, and retailers make often most of their money. And Black Friday in the U.S. is called Black Friday right after Thanksgiving because that's when a lot of retailers go from not being profitable to profitable for the year. So this is a big effect, and we had Cisco today, for example, saying their China business is down 25%. So if that hurts companies like that, that hurts the stock market, that hurts stock investors, that hurts Trump.
And there is also the fear that recession is on the horizon, isn't it? Dr. Cheng, do you expect the Chinese side to exploit this admission as part of their own external communication efforts to win over foreign or U.S. public opinion? Or should they?
Well, China may have this temptation, but I think China needs to be also cautious. At this moment, what China said will be taken by the U.S. public maybe the opposite side, because the Pew survey already shows that the U.S. public has the dislike to China is increased. Actually, 6% very negative view about China. So I think China need to be cautious to speak too much. I don't think China is in position to offer treatment for U.S. disease. The Trump administration's ignorance about macroeconomy, the U.S. arrogance. I think all this need to be solved within the U.S. Let's say, look at maybe the U.S. firms need to speak out. Maybe the Congress need to play a bigger role. For example, to put the limits on the president's power to impose tariffs. Some scholars from the U.S. already said that maybe Congress need to change laws of the Trade Action of 1974, Section 301, but also change the laws of 1962, Trade Expansion.
And with that
Section 232, to redefine, to put the limits on the how long, how much, and when that president can impose unilateral tariffs. Because according to the Constitution, the tariffs or trade is within the turf of Congress. I think Congress need to play a big role to set limits on president power, not China. China need to be cautious to step into their domestic debates.
Speaking of that, one U.S. financial analyst also suggested a clear non-Christmas related reason for why the Trump administration postponed the tariffs. They're confronted by the reality of American voter backlash, especially with presidential elections coming in 2020. Mr. Early, as the analyst put it, you just don't raise taxes on consumers and get re-elected. Do you agree that the potential for consumer and voter backlash forced the White House to back down, or any other reasons?
It's certainly part of it. You know, we know Trump, I think, compared to probably any president I can think of, is super sensitive to so many things. He wants everybody to like him. He knows they don't, but you know, he wants to be the guy who made the stock market go up, even though it's been 10 years of a great bull run. He wants to be the guy who made unemployment go down even more. He wants to take all this credit for a lot of things, and he's seeing that, you know, things are starting to turn a little bit. And frankly, I think the Chinese side is looking at this as a structural difference in the two political systems that, you know, that they can maybe exploit. I mean, Xi is effectively president for as long as he wants to be. You know, Chinese people and companies don't necessarily have the expectation to do anything except go along for the ride, whereas the American system is based on people complaining. You complain, you get your way. You know, to get voted up as president, you have to make a lot of people like you. So the U.S. system is highly sensitive, especially every 4 years, to what's going on. And frankly, Trump has had 3 pretty good years of continued stock market growth. People thought it would go down. It went up. You know, continued strong U.S. economy. And just now, as we're coming into this final year, things are starting to turn. So yeah, Trump is certainly very sensitive to that. I don't think it's just about Christmas. I think it's about a lot of things. But ironically, some of the public opinion polls show that these voters in the traditional Trump states are actually more supportive of him than he thinks, and they're more willing to bear pain, especially with U.S.-China conflict, than perhaps Trump realizes. So he may be a little bit too sensitive here as well.
And some analysts expressed doubt that the tariff will ever go into effect. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Early?
Yeah, you know, with trade wars, with politics, a lot of decisions are in the hands of a few people, and especially someone like Trump. I mean, you know, my thoughts are not worth anything, and I think neither are anyone else's. It is very hard to predict. A week ago, I don't think anybody would have predicted this. This is politics, and I think, ironically, this is Trump's greatest strength and his greatest weakness at the same time. The Chinese side expects a very structured, predictable approach, very, very formalized and expected. Trump is the complete opposite, which, you know, sometimes is to his detriment, but it also makes him very hard to guess. So, yeah, I have no idea, frankly, so we'll just have to watch and see together.
Another thing we're watching is this. On Wednesday, in speaking up about the crisis in Hong Kong, Trump tweeted, of course China wants to make a deal, let them work humanely with Hong Kong first. Dr. Cheng, why do you think he suddenly linked the trade war to Hong Kong? How serious do you think is about linking the two?
That is typical China bashing. I think it's dangerous for Mr. Trump to continue to create problems outside U.S. I think they shouldn't distract the U.S. public policies to external things, create a problem outside in Hong Kong, in China, and instead they maybe need to put more energy on solving their own problems. The U.S. economy is in recession. I personally, not myself, but also the Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, look at their figures. Already in first 2 quarters, numbers very bad. I think U.S. economy is in tipping point. Apart from that, look at the other domestic problems. Gunshot, they already, every year, more than 30,000 people are killed by gun. Put more energy on solving your own problems, my advice.
So Dr. Cheng mentioned U.S. economy is on a tipping point. Mr. Early, let me get your take on this. You know, amid growing fears of the trade war recession, following the dramatic drop in the stock market you mentioned earlier, Trump officials didn't blame China, but instead the U.S. Federal Reserve. Did this surprise you? Why do you think they did that?
You know, Trump has been a long critic of Jay Powell, even though Jay Powell hasn't even been in office or been Fed chairman for all that long, and it's certainly been an issue here. A lot of people protest that. They think the Fed should be more independent. You know, Trump is the kind of person who looks for people to blame when things go wrong. I think he doesn't want to blame China for this because that would implicitly call into question his strategy for dealing with China, and that becomes a more complicated issue. If he keeps it just to Jay Powell, that makes it look more confined. It makes it look more controllable and perhaps within Trump's power. So I think, you know, we'll see some of this scapegoating. The true issue is a lot more complicated, of course, and all this is connected, excuse me, and you're right that this inverted yield curve, these global negative yields on bonds, I mean, all this is in fact together in a big economic soup. So I don't think it's possible for Trump or anyone else to point the finger at a single person or a single factor.
And just take a look at what's happened over the past 3 months. In May, the Trump administration blamed China for the breakdown in talks, then dragged Huawei into the trade war as an alleged threat to national security. And last week, they nearly expanded the trade war into the currency war by accusing China of being a currency manipulator. This week, they suddenly postponed the latest round of tariffs, then linked trade war talks to Hong Kong crisis and blamed the U.S. Federal Reserve for the stock market plunge. What is really happening here, Mr. Early? Do you see a clear strategy here? Are they just opening more front against China?
Well, I agree. I don't think that there's a clear strategy, and I agree that's part of a problem. The one thing I would add, though, is, you know, not everything is about the trade war. You know, even with China, for example, letting the RMB depreciate a little bit. I mean, yeah, partly that was pretty obvious symbolic signal, even though economically the number wasn't huge. But another reason they pulled back on that is they don't want to see too much capital flight. That's not a trade war related issue, and neither is everything that Trump is doing as well. So I would just say to caution everyone, you know, thinking about this, you know, not to think of it as everything is win-lose. These are countries that have other concerns as well besides the trade war. I don't think it's necessarily bad if Trump does, and I didn't vote for Trump, but I don't think it's always bad if he does something that's not necessarily trade war specific. I mean, he has the U.S. economy to think about. He has the U.S. to manage. So I think the way we win this trade war, so to speak, is by gradually reducing the fighting versus, you know, seeing one side versus the other in that type of a structure.
In final remarks, goes to you, Dr. Cheng. How do you think that China ought to negotiate with the U.S. administration that seems inconsistent with its approach, seems to lack a clear strategy, and seems to change its mind from day to day?
I agree with Mr. James. There is no clear strategy. His message is very mixed, and nobody knows. And I read the article. I think that makes sense to mention here is that Mr. Trump, according to Madeleine Albright, Mr. Trump is the most anti-democratic president in U.S. history. So, and also we will see this. There's discussion saying that the end of the end of American century has started from 2003 when U.S. put army in Iraq. But now the trade war with China might accelerate the end of American century.
All right, we're going to leave it.
There's no corrections from Congress, from other partners.
We're running out of time. We're going to leave it there. Thank you for sharing your insights and analysis. Dr. Wallace Cheng joining me from Shanghai, and Mr. James Early joining me from Washington. And that does it for this edition of Point on CGTN. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next time.